Hello, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a Senior Program Manager from SharePoint Engineering. This is the SharePoint Framework and Tools and Libraries section for Getting Started with SharePoint Framework module. In this module, we'll concentrate on going through actual tooling which you use when you do development for SharePoint Framework or using the SharePoint Framework. We'll talk about slightly also the libraries and what is an AMD and a UMD script, which is relevant when you are referencing third-party scripts and in your client-side web parts. SharePoint Framework is based on open source tooling. So for the build processes and tooling, we are using Yeoman templates, which are essentially scaffolding your starting point for SharePoint Framework solution. The build process is gulp-based. You're using Node.js and NPM as the engine, Node.js more as the serving engine, and NPS as the package, JavaScript package engine for getting those packages. Technically, you could use something else there as well. There's a system.js is being used, the Webpack being used, SAS is used for CSS, and then development actually happens in TypeScript. From a JavaScript framework perspective, you can actually choose which framework you want to use. You can use React, Angular, Knockout, Ember, it doesn't really matter. There's multiple options out there, and we want to make sure that the SharePoint framework is adaptable enough for the future framework as well. So it's really up to you to choose which of the frameworks you actually want to use based on your client-side web part development. From a code editor perspective, you can use Visual Studio Code, Atom, Sublime, even Visual Studio IDE, if that's what you prefer. So really it's flexibility based on your choice as well. In Microsoft, we are typically using Visual Studio Code, but that's not really kind of a given. You can absolutely use whatever code editor what you prefer. If you come from a Microsoft background, all of those tooling might be slightly confusing, and you might feel more comfortable if we do a small mapping between what was the tooling in the Microsoft technologies and what it means in open source web stack development tooling. Let's start with an IIS Express and Microsoft .NET framework. Basically, in SharePoint Framework development, that's same as the Node.js. So the Node.js will work as your local host, as almost like the IIS Express in the classic implementations. You can also run server-side code using the Node.js engine, which you would be exposing then through internet or through an API. If you're familiar with NuGet, the replacement, or not a replacement, the comparison in the JavaScript world is NPM. So NPM is just the package manager for JavaScript files in the same way as NuGet is a package manager for Microsoft or in the Visual Studio, for example, .NET Framework assemblies. Gulp is basically your task manager. It's almost the same as MS Build if you're familiar with Microsoft tooling. TypeScript has its kind of even the historical history of TypeScript is coming more from a C# side, and the creators of TypeScript have been are pretty much the same as the creators of the C#. The TypeScript is pretty close to the C# development. There are certain differences, obviously, because we are moving from a server side or from a managed code to JavaScript implementation, but the key point of the TypeScript is that it's providing that typed way of doing development for the JavaScript, which natively would not be available. Whenever your code is being transcompiled, it is actually transformed to JavaScript. So there's no process side impact of using TypeScript because TypeScript is only used during development. And then Yeoman is the template generator or provider or the engine, which can be then compared to the Visual Studio Project template. So with Yeoman, you will request the Yeoman to create or start a creation process for SharePoint Framework solution templates in the same way as in the Visual Studio, you would go File, New, Project, and select the template which you want to use. Let's have a slightly more detailed look on what these individual toolings are. So NPM is a node package manager. It will be installed on a machine by default as part of the Node.js installation. And the exact version obviously depends on the Node.js version as well. You can install the NPM or a latest version of the NPM by running npm install. And And that will make sure that you have the right version available for your machine. But it is really the package manager for JavaScript in the same way as NuGet is for .NET Framework Managed Code. It is used for the customization to reference third-party JavaScript libraries and components and modules which can be then used within the client-side development. Yeoman templates are essentially a scaffolding tool for development projects. When you start a SharePoint Framework development, you will execute a Yeoman template, and that will then create you the initial starting point or a project structure, so to say, for your SharePoint Framework solution development. This is installed to your machine with npm, so you can run an npm install and yo, and that will make sure that the Yeoman template is available. And obviously after that, you will install the Microsoft SharePoint generator to the machine. But it is really the same thing as choosing File, New Project and selecting a template within a Visual Studio if you have a Microsoft background technology, if your technology is from a Microsoft side. Gulp is really the task manager or task runner for the individual tasks. So it will take care of the build and build tasks whenever we are bundling our code or whenever we are, for example, publishing our code to the CDN or packaging our code to a solution package. So it is an automation provider for the build tasks. It's platform agnostic, relatively simple solution with a strong ecosystem. So there's a lot of different commands and a lot of different extensibility available for Gulp in the internet. It is really the similar kind of a task manager as MS Build in the Visual Studio projects. TypeScript is typed JavaScript, and what it means is that essentially it is a typed superset of JavaScript which compiles to plain JavaScript. So during development time, you have a typed checking, you have intelligence, you have a much better way of avoiding challenges and issues if you have a larger project. And that's really the key value of the TypeScript. When the amount of code is growing, quite often there's a increased possibility for possible bugs or type check exceptions in JavaScript, because JavaScript natively isn't type aware. And this is where TypeScript actually helps. So when you're doing development, TypeScript will tell you if there's any issues within your code without running actually the code. So you can actually easily see the issues. And when you're doing development, you have intelligence available as well. Technically, you can use also any native JavaScript with SharePoint Framework. So you do not need to rewrite everything if you have any existing customizations, for example, developed using the script editor web part in SharePoint Classic sites. You can integrate those kind of JavaScripts relatively easily on top of the client-side web part and development. So you can start, for example, by getting existing JavaScript and integrate that to the client-side web part platform, and then later on maybe rewrite some of that existing JavaScript to TypeScript if that's needed. Office UI Fabric is really there to provide consistent front-end experience for SharePoint and for Office as well. It really powers the Microsoft own experiences, so are all of our new modern SharePoint experiences in SharePoint Online. It is available out of the box, so you don't actually need to do anything extra that to be available within the site. And the whole point of this one is that you're able to design your web parts seamlessly. You have reusable components, colors, fonts, and icons and stylings, and you don't need to really worry about the styling itself, especially if you're using those React components which are available. You can take individual controls and place them in your web part and concentrate really on the business logic of that web part, rather than concentrating how something will be presented for the end users. So Office UI Fabric React includes a rich set of reusable controls, which are natively used within our first-party web parts as well. Let's move into those, or let's have a closer look on those toolings in practice. So we'll have a look on the Yeoman templates, Gulp, Webpack, TypeScript, and Office UI Fabric. Let's have a look on the tooling, what we actually use within the SharePoint framework. So we're going to go through Yeoman templates, or the Yeoman, Gulp, Webpack, TypeScript, and also Office UI Fabric. So what does it actually mean in the context of SharePoint framework? So first of all, the Yeoman. So Yeoman templates are essentially giving us the capability of choosing a template or regenerating a solution based on the predefined structures what we're providing from Microsoft side. So essentially, if I execute, for example, a yo in my command line, it will actually give me the list of all of my installed Yeoman templates. In my case, the only installed Yeoman template is Microsoft.SharePoint. When I select that one, it's going to actually execute that template directly, and then it starts asking questions related on the type of the component, or what are we actually going to do, and what do we want to implement as part of the SharePoint Framework solution. Now, the SharePoint Framework Yeoman template will give you the initial starting point to actually create your solution. So, in this case, I actually added a second web part on this existing solution. So you can absolutely execute the Yeoman template multiple times and add additional components on the existing SharePoint Framework solutions as well. If I actually let's create a sample folder, and go to that sample folder, so we're in an isolated location, and again run yo. If I'm not defining at Microsoft/SharePoint, it will actually tell that, hey, that's the list of things which are available. So let me actually get that one. And then it is asking what kind of solution we want to create. Let's call the solution as a sample. In my case, it's then asking, is it a JavaScript framework or React or Knockout? One thing to notice around here, some people have been slightly confused on this one. Does it mean that the Angular or whatever Mustache or alternative frameworks are not supported? No. This is just the initial scaffolding of your solution. So technically, you could always start with the no JavaScript framework and also add the React support or Knockout support on top of it. What these default, the React and Knockout templates are here, they're just creating you the basic structure on the chosen framework. So Angular, you can absolutely do development using Angular in SharePoint Framework as well. There are certain things related on Angular where the Angular 1.x is the most suitable, and then if it's a newer version, the newer versions of Angular framework are essentially assuming that they're in a single page application, at least for now, so there might be some challenges. Anyway, so I'm selecting the framework what I'm going to use. In my case, I can select the web part and extension. Again, slightly depends which version of the SharePoint framework you have installed within your machine. So I can choose the web part as an example. It's going to ask me the web part name, and after that a description for the web part, and it would start the scaffolding project. Essentially, it's almost a similar thing if you come from a Microsoft background, as you would go to Visual Studio and say, create new project, and it will actually create the structures and templates for you. Or let's say create a new SharePoint farm solution, which was one of the options in Visual Studio, if you are familiar with the farm solution development. I'm not going to present there here because that takes quite a long time to actually complete. So what will happen when we execute the Yeoman templates, it will first create the structure, the SharePoint framework structure, solution structure for the solution, and then it starts adding all of the dependencies which the SharePoint framework and your chosen template option actually has. And that actually takes some time because it's pulling down all of those NPM packages from the internet. So let's not actually do that. Now, so let me actually go back in here and let's go to this Hello World sample. And we can actually continue looking more detailed what's actually happening within the SharePoint Framework solutions. After the Yeoman templates have been executed, you have the solutions available. Now, when we actually start working within the SharePoint Framework solution, we take advantage of Gulp. So Gulp essentially is our task manager, almost like the MS Build in the Microsoft technologies, if you have that Microsoft background. So Gulp, and then I can do Gulp tasks or tasks. but let me actually do that. So always a typos when I'm writing stuff. And this will essentially list all of the tasks within my SharePoint Framework solution which are available. And these are essentially predefined actions which have been automated, and will be executed by Gulp. As an example, we can see the Gulp serve, which is the one which is starting the local workbench, or trust dev cert, which is making sure that you can use HTTPS within your development box, or untrust dev cert, which will then remove that developer certificate from your machine. Clean, build, default, bundle, well, package stuff, dev deploy Azure storage, would be the one which is actually deploying your output of your web parts to the Azure CDN, if you're using Azure CDN as your hosting platform. Or package solution will then generate the SPP KG package for your SharePoint Framework solution. And then I can see the list of these tasks by doing gulp -- tasks, and that's actually always giving me what's available within the solution. This is the default set of tasks within the SharePoint Framework solution. And then executing one of these means that I'm just doing gulp and a command for that, so gulp serve as an example, and then that will start executing what's behind of the gulp serve. And in this case, it's the serving the web part from a local workbench, and it's actually going to start a browser window because I didn't do -- no browser, and I can see my Hello World web part available. Good. So what's a Webpack? So Webpack is one of the things what's kind of hidden in the background here as well. So let me actually go and open up the Visual Studio Code solution. And when we're doing implementation, we are implementing our code using TypeScript. TypeScript isn't, however, the language which browsers will be executing your output. So one of the use cases for Webpack is that Webpack is actually generating the actual JavaScript, which will be then used by the browser. So here's my actual Hello World web part, and when I'm doing then gulp bundle in my tasks, so if I would come here, and if I haven't done this in the past, I would actually have the bundle already, or gulp serve will actually generate the bundle as well. But if I do gulp bundle, that will transform the TypeScript to a JavaScript format, so it can be executed by the browsers. So TypeScript is only used when we're actually doing development, but then on runtime we're using a native JavaScript. And the transformation is done by the Webpack, and there's a few other things and many other things what the Webpack is doing underneath as well, helping us on the task and development and all of that. But that's an example. The gulp bundle is a good example. So here, if I open up my Hello World bundle.js from my dist folder, this is actually what is getting generated for your web part. So in this case, we did have a Hello World web part. There's the render method. There's the render things. There's my Hello World property, data version property, get property pane configurations. So you can actually find the similar methods here, but this is native JavaScript, which is then understood by the different browsers running actual HTML pages. And the Webpack is the one which is actually doing this link between or transformation between TypeScript and JavaScript. One thing also here to notice is the map file, and this file itself isn't really meant to be watched in here, but the map file is something which is helping us on the debugging of the code, so which is generated by the Webpack as well, based on, again, on the configurations. So now if we actually start again gulp serve, we can actually use, since we have the mapping file between the JavaScript and TypeScript, we can use that to help us on the debugging actions. So in this case, I'm going to use a browser to debug my UI. So let's add that Hello World web part here, and let's do an F12. So we'll open up the developer tools here, and let's actually try to find our solution or our actual code in TypeScript. So the actual code in TypeScript will be somewhere in these folders. It slightly depends again on the setup, slightly depends on a version which you're using, where it actually is landing. But here we go, there's our hello world web part, there's our TypeScript version of that web part as well. So let's actually slightly zoom this. There we go, and there we go. So the map file, which is generated by the Webpack, will help for the process to do transformation, for the developer tools to do the transformation between the actual JavaScript code which is getting executed versus the TypeScript. And what it means is that I can actually put breakpoints here, because as long as you're using the right tooling. And that means that now if I do save in here, I do have a breakpoint available on the developer tools. Let's actually do a refresh. And we actually hit that breakpoint directly, which is in TypeScript. So you can actually understand, and you can easily understand the values. You can easily drill down to the objects, the DOM element object. You can have a look on what's in the TIS, and have a look on the context as an example, or what are the other methods available within the TIS namespace or the TIS object. And this helps enormously when you're doing development. And there's multiple ways of doing debugging on the SharePoint framework. I'm not going to deep dive on that one in this demo, but one of the things where we use the Webpack, or what Webpack is helping us, is generating that map file, because it has been configured to do that within SharePoint framework underlying configuration. Good. So let's move on a different tooling side. So let me actually drop that one and let me go back on the Visual Studio Code side, and let's have a look on the TypeScript. And just quickly looking into the TypeScript, it's why the TypeScript is super powerful. I'm going to close the bundle because we're not going to use that, and let's do a small modification in here. So what I want is that I have actually 1, 2, 3, there's now 4 properties, and if I want here, I can actually add an additional property. So let's do demo property, which is string. So now, if I go to my code in TypeScript, I can start writing something like, let's actually do this.properties, and I actually get a preview. And the whole reason why we're getting this preview, and we can see, for example, this new demo property here, is that we're using TypeScript. Technically, for SharePoint Framework, you do not need to use TypeScript. You can absolutely use JavaScript as well. Probably the easiest way to do that would be to use TypeScript in the web part and then hook in your existing JavaScript library for that web part. But in the longer run, whenever your implementation or whenever your code base is expanding, if you have a complex web part, having this type checking during development time is enormously helpful. The challenge of the JavaScript is that you do not have type checking. The variables don't have a type checking either when we are actually writing the code. And the only way then to figure out is it working or not is by executing the JavaScript, and you might then still miss some issues. The TypeScript is essentially giving you the typing, for example, that this demo property is a string, and if you're trying to assign a wrong kind of a type to the item, you would get actually an exception, or you would be notified by the fact TypeScript that it's actually this property is missing, or you're trying to assign a number to a string value. In normal JavaScript, that's actually possible. So that wouldn't actually cause an exception or an error execution. So TypeScript is really there to increase the quality of your code and make the code readable and more understandable. It's also kind of if you come from a C# background, it's probably more easier to adapt to develop as well. And TypeScript is growing to be the kind of a de facto model for doing JavaScript development clearly in the industry as well. So as an example, Google in Angular development are using TypeScript, so making sure sure that everything is working properly. And there's a few other additional examples out there. So it's clearly helping the productivity, making sure that there's no development time mistakes, and making sure that you're type safe, or whenever your JavaScript is getting created, the bundles are getting created, those should be working fine. Obviously, if there's a mistake in a code, there could be a mistake in a code, but this will absolutely make sure that your quality of your code is better. Now, quickly to the final thing what I wanted to show related on tooling. So let me actually stop this one, and let's go to slightly different examples in our tutorials. And that's document example web part. So I'm going to use these basic tutorial samples. All of this code and how this have been created is available and documented in the devtodos.com/SharePoint. But in this case, this is a web part. Let me open that one in here, which is actually using Office UI Fabric, and to be more precise, Office UI Fabric React. And we can see that if we open up the package.json file. So we have added here the actual references for the Office UI Fabric React, or have we? Fabric. And no, we haven't, which is kind of interesting that it's not in here. Let's get actually open up in here. Well, obviously it's not there because we no longer need to actually do that necessarily if that's not needed. So in here, this is the document card example web part. This one is at the web part host. This is a React-based implementation, which is then actually rendering a new component, which is called a document card example. So let's actually go to the document card example and have a look on that one. So the document card example component is here. And as you can see, we are using document card. We are using document card controls from the Office UI Fabric React. So what it means is that we can render our UI using these reusable components. So in this case, we have a document card and we are providing the needed properties for that control, and that's going to be responsible of rendering the UI for the end users, or the document card preview, or the document card title and document card activity. And the key point of the Office UI Fabric really is that it's giving you styling, it's giving you logos, it's giving you even the behavior through this Office UI Fabric React components. So you as a developer, you don't have to worry about the right styling and even in some cases the behavior. You just concentrate on what's the business case, what's the values, what's the attributes which we're actually setting for this object, and you get a nice UI. Now, considering the fact that this particular React component or React component which is embedded on the web part, this is the section which is rendering the end user or the UI elements for the end users. So let's have a look on what does it actually render out. So let's flip up back on the command line. Let's do call observe, because we want to have a new browser window opened with this web part locally from our local workbench. And we're kind of again running through the webpack, running through the different things, running through the tasks, and there's our workbench. And now if we add our web part on the page, there's our web part. And notice that we were not responsible actually rendering or styling or creating the styles and the end user UI for this particular component. We essentially, within our code, we reference Office UI React Fabric React components in here, which are document card title, activities, and all of that. And then we built our UI based on those existing controls. So we just provided what the key information like the files and links and all of that inside, and the images inside as an attributes for these controls. And then we got a pretty nice looking UI which is listing document components, which is also aligned on the UI which we have in the SharePoint Online. So essentially the Office UI Fabric, when you're using the Office UI Fabric, it actually makes sure that your web parts are looking like the native out-of-the-box web parts. We are using the Office UI Fabric in the native first-party web parts as well. And we're also using the Office UI Fabric React controls, because then we, even the first-party developers, those guys who concentrate on the web part development, they don't need to worry about the styling. The styling is given to you automatically, and some of the behavior is given to you automatically by the React components. So super beneficial, super powerful. Quickly looking into this one, so I'm going to do an F12. Let's quickly have a look on that HTML rendering for this one. So there's my HTML rendering. Let's slightly adjust that one. So you can actually see that there's quite a lot of styling elements which are getting included here. So the class is MS Document Card and Actionable. And there's MS Document Card Preview Title. And if I click that one, we can see that all of the styling is coming automatically for that section, or the preview styling, or the document card title styling, or so on. So you essentially get all of this for free, and you don't need to worry about what was the style, how do I render that, what does it actually mean, where do I actually render my actual dates, and how do I render my labels and information. That's given to you natively by the Office UI Fabric, which is super powerful and increases your performance and productivity when you're developing these web parts. Good, that's all what we wanted to do on this quick demo around the different tooling, what we're playing, and the tooling which we use as part of the SharePoint Framework development. Few slides and kind of a high-level clarifications on a terminology which is quite often being used in the modern web stack development. We have a few kind of different scripts and definition scripts which are available for people to use. These scripts in the internet. Some of these scripts are using the AMD approach, and the AMD is kind of a standard on implementing JavaScript libraries in the modular way. This way, you can easily package your code in the smaller pieces or modules, which are then more easily reusable as part of your implementations. And this is providing a synchronous way for us also to download these modules, so it will have a better performance for your experience or for your client-side web part. You can also minimize these modules and you can make them, which makes them smaller from a size perspective, so things will be looking faster. UMDs are universal module definitions, and these are basically let's say an extended set or improved or evolution from AMD modules. So these are also used to create modules, JavaScript modules, which are capable of working and being loaded from anywhere. So you can use them in both client and server side, and you can and also the popular script loaders are able to support them. In here, you can reference, or in a pages, a web page, you can reference them using the script tag, or in the server side, you can load them using the common.js as well, or import them to be available within your customizations. And really, the key point of this UMD and AMD and UMD modules is that when you're using a third-party third-party scripts which are available in the internet, it's good to understand if the script is AMD or UMD compliant. Because if it's not, then how do we reference those within our config JSON is slightly different, and how do we use them within a client-side implementation. So AMD UML or AMD or /UMD options means that we're specifying the URL where the script should be downloaded from within the config JSON. And then inside of our implementation, we can reference to that type and those modules, and we can easily implement our functionalities based on that. Non-AMD modules are slightly different, so referencing them slightly differently, and we would and you're in the config JSON. So you specify the URL where the script should be downloaded from, and you specify a name of the variable with which the script will be registered in a global scope. And then you're able to access that within your customizations. This is super fast and super high level kind of a reference to AMD and UMD. But please have a closer look on the dev.office.com/SharePoint and our guidance on how to use third-party JavaScripts and within a client-side implementation. We have also multiple client-side web part samples available, which will show you, for example, how to use jQuery or Angular directly within your client-side web part implementation. But it's good to understand that these terms or have a look on these terms, and then you can further investigate the differences in the client-side development if you're interested. And that's it for this module. So we went through quickly a few notes around the different toolings in the SharePoint Framework development, kind of walking through all of the different tools, what we're using. We talked about the libraries. We talked about slightly in really high level AMD and UMD scripts, kind of getting you a high level clarification how things are, how to approach using third-party scripts within the client-side web part. If you're interested in learning more about SharePoint Online or on-premises development, we would highly recommend having a look on the SharePoint Patterns and Practices initiative. SharePoint Patterns and Practices is a community-driven initiative coordinated by the SharePoint engineering, where we provide code samples, solutions, reusable components, guidance documentations. We have also community calls. The concentration areas are SharePoint Framework, SharePoint Adding Model, Microsoft Graph, and Office 365 APIs. AKMS SharePoint PMP is the one address to remember. Thank you for watching.